Good morning. It's been 6 years since the COVID-19 outbreak, and I suspect that many of you have suppressed many of its devastating consequences. That's Riley the dog. It's really important that we don't let down our guards about viral outbreaks because, as I will demonstrate, we're likely to experience one in the next few years. I'm Dennis Liotta, a professor of chemistry, pharmacology, and chemical biology at Emory University, and my lab has discovered several important antiviral agents. I'll tell you more about that later on, but for now, I'd like you to look at the viral outbreaks that have occurred over the last 4 decades to put what I'm going to say in context. The first is HIV/AIDS. This disease, which has been responsible for the deaths of over 40 million people, works by disabling our immune system. Today, over 44 million people live with this disease, and that may be concerning because probably all of you know someone who is HIV positive. But your concerns have a silver lining. Because of advances in the drugs available to treat the disease, most HIV positive patients can live near normal lives. This tremendous achievement occurred through the advocacy of millions of people who refused to accept the status quo. Of course, statistics only tell part of the story. This is a photo that appeared in 1990 on the cover of Life magazine, depicting the deathbed reconciliation of a young gay man with his family who had previously disowned him. The psychological and social stigmas associated with HIV/AIDS reminds us that pandemics touch every aspect of our lives. HIV/AIDS was first identified in 1981, and at the time, some attributed it to the wrath of God. It took 6 years for the first drug to be approved and another 10 years to develop a therapy that actually kept people alive. However, survival had a cost. Patients on these therapies were required to take as many as 8 pills every 8 hours, and poor compliance could lead to the development of resistant virus mutants that rendered the therapies ineffective. Think about it. For these individuals, there was no such thing as a true holiday. It took another 9 years to get a convenient formulation of 3 drugs in a single pill taken once a day. I'm the co-inventor of M-tricytidine, one of the drugs most often used in these 3 drug combinations. And then, of course, there was COVID-19, which is transmitted as an aerosol. Let me remind you about the chaos that ensued during that first year of the viral outbreak. On March 10th, 2020, major events across the US were canceled. Soon, hospitals began to fill up at an alarming rate, and there were no available treatments to suppress the infection. By early April 2020, New York City, one of the early epicenters of the pandemic, had already experienced 2,500 COVID-related deaths. And by the end of that month, that death toll had exceeded 17,000. During that month of April, schools implemented remote learning programs. And this has had a lasting negative impact on the mental health and fitness of our students. On December 14th, COVID vaccines began to be distributed, and after 1 year, March 2021, the death toll in the US had climbed to over 500,000 individuals. So were these pandemics caused by the wrath of God? Probably not. To the contrary, because we live in a highly interconnected world, megatrends are setting up conditions that favor more frequent emergence of viral diseases with pandemic potential. What are these megatrends? Climate change is allowing virus-carrying arthropods that for centuries only inhabited the tropical regions of the Earth to relentlessly move north and south to what had previously been less temperate climates. For example, dengue fever, which is transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, is now endemic in parts of Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and California. Increasing urbanization brings people in closer contact and allows aerosol infections to be more effectively transmitted. International travel can bring people to remote areas where they can carry back infections to highly populated areas. International trade facilitates the movement of virus-carrying arthropods who can hitch rides in shipping containers. Deforestation forces animals that harbor viruses to increasingly encroach on areas where humans live and work. Bioterrorism can result in the creation of engineered viruses that are more lethal than their natural counterparts. Armed conflicts create massive population displacements, the breakdown of sanitation systems, malnutrition, and cross-border transmission of pathogens. When these threats align, the outcomes can be devastating, even if the outbreak occurs in a remote area. These megatrends are consistent with the increase in major viral outbreaks over the past century, which, as you'll see, have become much more closely spaced. Importantly, please notice that virtually all the major viral outbreaks in the past 100 years involved RNA viruses. To understand how viruses exploit these megatrends, let's examine how viral infections occur. Viruses are not cells and cannot replicate on their own. Instead, they gain entry into human cells by binding their viral surface receptors to specific receptors on the cell surface of human cells, much the way the right key, when fit into a lock, allows an entry into a room. Once inside the cell, viruses hijack the cell's reproductive machinery and turn it into a virus factory. A single infected cell can produce hundreds of thousands of copies of itself each day. Like little bots, the newly created viruses repeat the same infection cycle again and again. The copying of the virus genetic material is prone to error and could lead to the creation of more virulent mutant forms of the virus. The infected cells and tissues eventually die when virus production becomes so great that their membranes rupture. What makes RNA viruses so problematic? These viruses exhibit extremely high genetic variability, which facilitates the likelihood that one of those strains will find a new home in a human. So when you think about the next pandemic, think when, not if. Because of this imminent threat, research groups around the world are currently attempting to discover countermeasures that could be used against virus X, the unknown agent that will cause the next pandemic. However, the challenges are substantial. Currently, scientists have identified well over 10,000 different species of viruses, and millions are actually thought to exist that haven't been fully characterized as yet. This makes it virtually impossible to predict which virus will cause our next pandemic. To deal with this staggering challenge, scientists are attempting to develop countermeasures designed to work against a broad spectrum of viruses. One such approach was developed here at Emory by an academic entity called DRIVE, which I co-founded with Dr. George Painter. DRIVE discovered and developed molnupiravir, which in December of 2021 received emergency use authorization by the US FDA for treating COVID-19 infection. Because of its broad spectrum activity, molnupiravir may prove to be the first new antiviral we stockpile for the next pandemic. While this is, of course, good news, the reality is we need many more different types of countermeasures. The lesson here is that we can't afford to be passive about threats to our health security, because they literally can impact every aspect of our lives. When large-scale viral outbreaks occur, we can't produce the goods and services we need to keep our economy running, and we can't effectively treat individuals whose health is impaired. So it's essential that everyone take health security very personally. I understand that global threats to our personal well-being appear to be beyond our control, but they are not. Let me remind you that personal advocacy can change the world. The civil rights movement and the women's suffrage movement stand as clear examples of that. And in the fight against viral infections, let me add a personal anecdote. In 1990, my lab discovered two compounds, M-tricytidine and lamivudine, that would become the critical components of 18 FDA-approved HIV combination therapies that are taken once a day. Importantly, even after 20 years in the marketplace, these drugs remain as first-line therapies. The Emory Office of Technology Transfer estimates that over 90% of HIV patients on therapy take or have taken one of the drugs discovered in my lab. Personal advocacy can take many forms. While not everyone has the technical skills to make the drugs that we would need to fight virus X, everyone can advocate with their words, with their actions, and with their votes to step up our preparedness for the next pandemic. Everyone can learn the fundamentals of palliative care. Good hydration and body temperature control helped Ebola patients survive when there were no treatments available. And conscious efforts to minimize exposure to infected individuals can significantly reduce the amount of virus our immune systems have to work to suppress. Much of the discord in our society arises from economic and social inequalities, and everyone is impacted differently by these disparities. Well, I'm here to tell you that viruses are non-discriminating equal opportunity parasites that infect humans irrespective of their age, sex, race, religion, ethnicity, economic status, or political affiliations. Just like death and taxes, none of us can avoid these infections. So we have a common enemy here. Let's use all the tools available to us to mount a well-thought-out, preemptive attack against these indiscriminate killers before they get the chance to kill us. Thank you.